Hey guys, and welcome back to the Finance Now podcast. This podcast is purely for informational and educational purposes, and it's my way of sharing my knowledge, research, and opinions with you. I'm Anurag Birla, and starting off this week with the macro debrief as usual. Right, retail sales came in earlier this last week, and they were down to negative 0.9% versus what was estimated to be negative 0.5%. So worse than expected. Sales excluding automobiles, gasoline, building materials, and food services rose 0.4% in May, which is actually up from last month's reading of negative 0.1%, while dining out sales were actually down 0.9%. Online sales surprisingly jumped 0.9% with, clothing retailer sales jumping 0.8%. Furniture store sales were up 1.2%, and sporting goods, hobby, musical instrument, and bookstore sales were also up 1.3%. So what these numbers kind of show is that clearly there is still demand for consumer discretionary items, right? It's likely because, maybe tariff impacts have not kicked in yet, or people are trying to front run these tariff impacts during this pause where they're just trying to buy things as much as they can before prices maybe increase, but it hasn't worsened. These numbers have not worsened the way maybe markets would have expected. But I also think businesses, from their perspective, they've not taken any drastic strategic decisions, right? Because of the uncertainty that revolves around policy, the deals that are being made, have been made, or are yet to be made. I think businesses want the full picture before they actually take any strategic decision about how they want to price certain items and certain goods going forward. So I think if we think about retail sales numbers and we link it to inflation, they have somewhat of an interesting relationship, right? There's very obviously a dampening effect that inflation has on retail sales after adjusting for the price increases. But then you also have price increases, which may affect the dollar value of retail sales as well. So, we're probably going to see some movement in the second half of the year. And this is definitely a number to watch out for, because it will give us a good indication alongside, consumer confidence and consumer sentiment as to where we see the overall economy and expenditure and perhaps even GDP heading. The second piece of macro data that came out was obviously a big one. It was the interest rate decision. I will say, to be honest, there should be no surprise here. Right, we've known Powell's stance on tariffs and interest rates all along, right? And what we saw earlier this week was that the Fed decided to keep rates steady. It was kept held at between 4.25% and 4.5%. So I have to say that despite all the Trump aggression against this decision, he goes off on Truth Social, and you see all his stuff on Twitter as well, or X rather. It's seemingly, I think, the right decision by Jay Powell. The labor market has not deteriorated drastically, right? Yes, it's weakening, as we see with the initial jobless claims and continuing jobless claims week over week. But unemployment, I think the latest number was 4.2%, which is still around that natural rate of unemployment determined by the economists and the Fed. So I do think the labor market having not deteriorated is a big factor that plays into why Powell doesn't see it necessary to cut rates at the moment, and most definitely not an aggressive rate cut. You look at the way the stock market is performing, right? The S&P is around all-time highs, and this is despite the risk of inflationary tariffs that remain, and this is despite the geopolitical tensions that are going on, the war. I mean, it's hard to see a compelling reason for rates to be cut at the moment. I will say one of the things that stuck out to me is how mixed the Fed themselves are on how many rate cuts will happen, right? Like the 19 of them, and how there is divergence between what they think is going to happen. 10 officials say there will be at least 2 cuts this year. 2 are saying that there'll be 1 cut, and 7 are actually saying no cuts. Of course, we know where Trump stands, right? He wants rates to be cut as he wants to issue less expensive long-term debt. Makes sense from his perspective, but I think this hawkish approach from the Fed is warranted given the current situation and the inability to actually forecast the economic impact of policies of war and how they're going to affect the underlying economy of the US in the medium to long term. Now, moving away from the macro picture, I will say there are no real earnings that were of interest to me in particular this last week. Obviously, there are companies that reported, but that said, there's no shortage of news in the market to discuss. And there are 2 key pieces of news that I wanted to kind of go over. But the first one being not necessarily from this last week, but I guess over the last few weeks, it's been the Circle IPO and the subsequent performance of that stock. So for those that are living under a bubble, Circle Internet Group is a global fintech company, which is predominantly known for issuing the stablecoin USDC. Right now, USDC is a dollar-backed stablecoin, which is pegged with the US dollar 1-for-1. And it's the second largest stablecoin by market cap. So it holds 27% of market share, behind maybe the more familiar USDT or Tether, also known as Tether. And USDT holds 67% of market share. Now, Circle IPO'd earlier this month at a price of $31 per share. And since then, it has been on an absolute tear. It is now trading at $240.28, which is almost 8 times its IPO valuation. Right? Those who would have got in early would have had an extremely sweet 2 weeks. But I think that before we really dig in and try to break down the valuation, let's understand how this company even makes money. So customers would deposit cash to receive USDC, right? They give them US dollars, they get USDC. The company then uses this cash that's deposited by customers to buy highly liquid and low-risk assets, so short-term treasuries, basically. Now, the interest earned on these reserves, on these cash reserves, is the company's main source of income. This is referred to as reserve income. So basically, the more that USDC is in circulation in the market, the more money Circle will be able to generate. Now, their main cost is maintaining the stablecoin peg, by ensuring full backing and liquidity. But Circle do not charge users transaction fees or other direct costs for issuing or for using USDC. So what this model allows Circle to do is earn a spread between the yield on its reserve assets and the cost of maintaining the stablecoin peg. So this effectively generates revenue without charging transaction fees or direct costs to users, as I mentioned. Now, why is this maybe a good time for a company like Circle to IPO? Well, the Trump administration up until now has shown a lot of support for cryptocurrencies, and this adds to investor confidence, of course, as we can see in the subsequent 2-week performance. Now, the regulatory outlook has also been supportive, and this is backed by the recent passing by the Senate of the Genius Act. So what is the Genius Act? This act is essentially the first regulatory framework for stablecoins to be used in payments. Now, it requires that stablecoin issuers be fully backed by safe assets like US dollars and short-term treasuries, which Circle is. It prohibits stablecoins that pay interest to holders, and it enforces strict transparency and all that anti-money laundering rules. So this bill, another key element is that it limits big tech companies from issuing stablecoins without regulatory approval, and it protects consumer data. So basically, big tech have to get regulatory approval before issuing a stablecoin of their own. So what does this bill and I guess the Circle IPO mean for the future of stablecoins and even payments, right? Like, I think it's fair to assume, of course, a lot of innovation, right? It may mean with regards to stablecoins, a lot of new players in the payments ecosystem. And we can actually see the pressure it had on companies like Visa and MasterCard. Both, are down about 6 to 7% in the last week. So you can see money flowing out of some of these big legacy payment players. I'm just going to go out and say it. I do not think Visa and MasterCard are going to become redundant. These are companies that have outperformed the S&P index over time. And, I reckon that these are companies that will adopt and change their business models into being more blockchain friendly. It's going to force innovation from them. And I guess for consumers, it's going to erode fees and shorten payment times. Of course, I think this entire bill, this technology, is going to revolutionize cross-border payments, right? It's going to avoid those traditional bank fees and, lengthy delays that customers face till date. And this seems like a net positive for your average Joe, right? With regards to Circle, though, going back to Circle, the rise up to about $240 a share and that current valuation of about $55 billion, to me seems like a stretch. I'm not denying how important stablecoins may become in the future, and I'm definitely not denying the growth that Circle may have, but it's currently trading at a forward PE of 192.2, right? It's extremely lofty. The convenience is great, but I mean, from my perspective, customers are not going to adopt this super quickly, right? These things will take time to come in and shape the way we transact. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a quarter. You aren't going to find people buying 10 different types of stablecoins either, to purchase Amazon products with an Amazon stablecoin or Apple products with an Apple stablecoin, or same thing for Google. So I do think that this is it's such a crucial thing. It's great technology, and blockchain technology has been around for a while. It's not new, right? But we've still not seen that kind of adoption, probably because of regulatory headwinds, right? And now that we have a tailwind behind us with the administration backing the idea of cryptocurrencies and stablecoins, I still think there's a lot of educating that needs to be done for your average consumer to understand blockchain and to understand how these transactions occur, for them to feel safe actually buying things like this. So while the idea and technology is great, and I'm not denying that at all, it's just hard for me to justify current levels. I will say this is definitely a stock I'm going to be watching over the next few quarters, right? The bill still has to pass the House of Representatives and go to the president, so I'll be keeping an eye on that too to see if there are any changes. But, I think the main thing and the key thing here would be tracking the actual performance of the business of Circle over the next few quarters, and also what management have to say about the outlook from their perspective. Now, moving on to the second piece of news, it would be around big tech and Meta and Scale AI's deal. So in Meta's second largest deal till date, they announced a 49% non-voting stake in Scale AI for $14.8 billion. For those that don't know, Scale AI is essentially a data infrastructure company which specializes in, high quality, scalable data labeling and curation services that basically help fuel enterprise AI and the development of machine learning models. So they monetize by charging enterprises for custom data annotation services, and they provide integrated tools that allow these enterprises to embed labeling into AI workflows, and basically they support a wide range of industries, all the way from your autonomous driving to natural language processing. Their core business model and what their value proposition is as a company addresses a key bottleneck actually in the development of AI, right? Which is obtaining large amounts and volumes of accurately labeled data in an efficient manner and at scale. So basically, Scale AI transform, clean, sort, however you want to say it, they do that for messy and unstructured data into more well-organized data sets, just so it's easier for machines to learn from. And as part of the deal, Scale AI CEO and founder Alexander Wang, who is just 28 years old, he left Scale he left Scale AI to join Meta, where he's going to be leading a new superintelligence unit, what they call superintelligence unit, focused on next generation AI systems. I will say this deal is pretty intelligently done. As a 49% non-voting stake technically avoids triggering US antitrust regulatory scrutiny, but obviously I think the regulatory body can decide to investigate if they want. Now, Scale AI remains an independent company operationally, right? They're going to maintain separation from Meta in terms of their business operations and customer data access. It's not going to be absorbed by Meta. But despite this, I think some key customers of Scale AI historically have adjusted their strategy. We saw Google terminated their deal with the company. OpenAI is also winding down its relationship, citing concerns about Meta's involvement, and they're looking for other alternatives. So what does this all mean for Meta? What does this deal mean for Meta? Well, they get access to critical AI data infrastructure, and that can hopefully help propel them forward in the AI race, which they have started lagging, right? There are risks. We've seen these risks with Google and OpenAI play out, and of course, tech companies may want to distance themselves to maybe more neutral players, as we are seeing in the market, right? And perhaps this is an opportunity for some Scale AI alternatives to come in and drive growth in their respective businesses. But I think what this acquisition shows us is Meta coming aggressively, right? They're really trying to drive forward with this deal and with their talent acquisition as well. Apparently they've gone after some OpenAI staff with $100 million bonuses to entice them to join Meta. I mean, this is an absurd amount of money. So we can see the AI race between big tech it's already been heated up, I guess, but it's starting to reach a new level, right? Big partnerships, big money for compensation being offered and thrown around. It's becoming an incredibly competitive environment for these companies to edge out forward with respect to each other. And while it remains to be seen how effectively Meta can actually leverage this deal in their own processes, they have come out guns blazing on this front. And to add to that, they've also come out guns blazing with a new product with Oakley. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, right? Like, it's tying in their whole AI and Gen AI powered theme. So these glasses that are in partnership with Oakley are Gen AI powered, and they're supposedly designed for athletes and active users. It combines the eyewear and the aesthetic of Oakley's with the technology of Meta. Honestly, if you haven't seen them, you have to take a look. They look incredibly cool in my opinion. All I think about when I see them is that they look like something Apple would have wanted their product to look like. It looks awesome. I mean, the camera is a significant upgrade from the Meta Ray-Ban glasses that they had. These support live streaming, which in this modern day creator economy, where every athlete is seemingly a Netflix star, is a big bonus. They released a video where you saw the likes of Patrick Mahomes come out using it. The glasses have speakers and voice commands that are powered by Meta AI. It allows for hands-free control to take calls, listen to music, send WhatsApp or Messenger messages, or even record what you're seeing. The price point is not crazy either. By no means am I saying it's cheap, right? But for what it is, which are Gen AI power Oakleys, I'd say it's pretty well priced. It's for the limited edition, which I think has tinted lenses, it's $499, and the $399 models will launch later in the summer. This product deepens Meta's partnership with Essilor Luxottica, right? First the Ray-Bans owned by Essilor, and now the Oakleys, which is also owned by them. And this further cements, I guess, Meta's leadership in the eye-wearable AI market. Once again, I'm finding Apple kind of lagging this space, right? Vision Pro was meant to be a groundbreaking technology. Adoption is just not there. It's a clunky good. People are not going to be walking around with it. This is a much more reasonable entry into the eye wearable AI market, and it seems to kind of line up with what Meta's entire vision is, which is, capturing moments, sharing them, kind of what social media has become nowadays. And all in all, I think Meta seem to be carrying some really strong momentum forward, right? Their stock price has been on an absolute ripper over the last few years, done incredibly well, and with this new product, I think it's something I'm extremely excited by. I do wonder whether the adoption, however, is going to match the excitement. So while I love the product, it's a wait and see game once again. And it's definitely something I'm going to try to get my hands on at some point. But, if you haven't checked it out, do check it out. Now that does it for today's episode. As usual, anything I say is not formal investment advice. It's purely my opinion and is meant to be for informational and educational purposes only. So please do your own research before making any decisions. With that, I thank you for listening. I'm Anurag Birla, and this is the Finance Now podcast.